everyone, welcome to this WSET Industry Talk. I'm Sarah Hobday. I'm Head of Research and Curriculum for beer qualifications here at WSET, and I'm a member of our environmental group. So first, to briefly introduce WSET, we are the global leader in drinks education, with courses open to both industry professionals and enthusiasts across 4 levels, from one-day beginner to expert diploma. Courses are available in more than 15 languages and in over 70 countries. And for more information about WSET or to locate your nearest course provider, please visit wsetglobal.com. Thank you for joining today's Industry Talk. So WSET's Industry Talks provide a global platform for connection, bringing together leading voices from across the drinks industry to engage in meaningful discussions. Each session explores the key trends, challenges, and innovations shaping our industry, offering diverse perspectives from experts worldwide. By encouraging positive and open conversations, we aim to inspire, inform, and empower our audience with valuable insights and actionable takeaways. And today, we're excited to launch From Soil to Glass, Climate Action in the Global Drinks Industry. This is a 3-part series dedicated to sustainability. These sessions aim to raise awareness, highlight the urgency of the climate crisis, explore the industry's impact, and share actionable solutions for a more sustainable future. In today's session, we'll be setting the scene for the series by exploring the urgent impact of climate change on the drinks industry, discussing how climate change is disrupting raw materials, supply chains, and consumer trends. We'll be continuing that conversation in our May and July sessions as well, so please register for those via the details in the chat. Few housekeeping points. Please note this session will be recorded and available to watch via WSET's Global Events Hub on our YouTube channel. Please post any questions you have into the Q&A box, and we will try to cover as many of these as possible at the end of the session. We're thrilled to be collaborating on this sustainability series with the Vine Strategy Group. The Vine Strategy Group is a specialist consultancy dedicated to advancing sustainability in the global wine industry. In collaboration with partners worldwide, they design, develop, and implement high-impact projects that drive meaningful progress and create lasting change. And thank you especially to Tom Outram for working closely with us to develop this series. And now I'll introduce you to our chair for today's panel discussion. This is Michel Bouffard. Michel is a sommelier, author, and wine critic. Based in Canada, Michel was the co-owner of House Wine from 2003 to 2015, a highly regarded company based in Vancouver that specialized in cellar management and educational events. She also founded and was the president of the British Columbia chapter of the Canadian Association of Professional Sommeliers. Michel now lives and teaches WSET courses in Montreal and gives numerous tasting sessions, including for wine associations such as Interrone and Wine Australia. In 2017, Michel founded Tasting Climate Change, an international symposium to explore the challenges and solutions in the wine industry. And in 2018, Urbania magazine recognized her work by selecting her as one of 50 extraordinary Quebecers. In continuation with her work on climate change, she co-wrote a book called Quel vin pour demain, which was published by Duno in September 2021. The book talks about the solutions available for the wine industry to adapt and mitigate climate change. And with that, I will now hand over to Michel to introduce today's discussion and panel.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. To talk about something that is quite important, and I do hope that at the end of this webinar that you will feel that you can be part of the solution with us. And to join us today, we have David Patterson, General Manager and winemaker at Panelist Vineyard in British Columbia, Canada. We have Stephanie Jordan, founder of Avalon Spirit and Drinking Out Loud in the Netherlands. We have Edwin Mason, PhD, General Manager, Sustainability for New Zealand Wine Growers. And we have Mark Chapman, CEO of Zero Carbon Forum. Thank you so much, everyone. I know that you're all going to bring fantastic insight, and I'll have a few questions for each of you. And at the end, we'll have a discussion because I know that from the discussion between the four of you, we'll have some good insights. David, I will start with you. You are based in British Columbia. And for some of us who live in Canada have followed closely how British Columbia has been severely impacted by climate change, specifically in 2024. Can you share with us what happened and what you have put in place to be sustainable?
For sure. Well, hi, everyone from all around the world. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, so I'm situated up in British Columbia, very close to the 50th parallel, so very far north, quite a way away from the equator. And I think what we've seen certainly in the last 5 years and very much so in the last 24 months is the extremes of climate change. The further away we get from the equator, we seem to see more extreme weather events than ever before. So I'll quickly start in 2018. We saw for the first time minus 25 degrees centigrade on our site, which caused trunks to crack and a lot of death in vines. Since then, every winter, since that 2018 winter, we've seen some sort of bud damage from extreme cold. But that's also juxtaposed by far more extreme heat during our growing season. So 2021, we saw positive 48 degrees centigrade on our vineyard. So Vitis vinifera is kind of a canary in the coal mine when it comes to climate change. They don't really like that much extreme weather events when you have a difference of over 70 degrees centigrade between the height in the summer and the cold in the winter. Vinifera struggles through that. And we came to the 23-24 winter, and everywhere in our valley, in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia, saw at least minus 26 and sometimes up to minus 30 or down to minus 30. That resulted in a lot of death of vines. So about 20% of our industry is completely pulling out or has pulled out and will be replanting this spring. Luckily, on my site, we didn't lose any vines. We still have life in our vineyard, but everything has been retrained from the graft union or from the own-rooted scion, and we're rebuilding our vineyard. We got almost no crop last year. We kind of morbidly joked about it being an acres per ton year rather than a tons per acre. And it was 11 acres for 1 ton of grapes, which is not sustainable, shall we say. So what we did is we lobbied our government to allow us to make something, and we went as an industry across the border down into Washington, into Oregon, and into California, and also across the country to our other major region in Ontario to get juice and grapes and at least allow ourselves to make something to bring to market from the 24 vintage. We're very, very thankful that we're allowed to do that. It felt very strange, but also a fun challenge to get material from elsewhere, put our stamp on it as British Columbian winemakers, while we spent all the money on farming and retraining our vineyards or pulling out and replanting. What we are now doing, most people are doing, is sort of following what probably about 20% of the industry was already doing, which is looking at soil regenerative farming and not using herbicide. One of the key things that we've noticed from this extreme cold event has been that the vineyards that were hilling up around their graft union as part of their weed mitigation strategy are the ones that have survived by just having that little bit of soil around the graft union. during the winter that's insulated those latent buds within the graft union just enough to keep the vine alive and give us a regenerative action out of the vines rather than needing to pull out. Those that had a big herbicide strip and had pumped their vines full of water and fertilizer, those are the ones that seem to be dead. So in some ways, it's very validating for those of us that have already been following more of a long-term sustainable model in our farming practices to see that was actually very effective to keep life. Now what we're seeing also is that we need to spend a little bit more in the vineyard than ever before by taking one of the shoots that comes out of the graft union, tying it to the next plant down below to its graft union, and then hilling up over that, basically giving us an insurance cane that could come up out of the earth and give us at least half a crop every year and also sustain life in the vineyard. I think we would be naive to think as an industry that this was a one-off event and we're not going to see it again, or a once in 30-year event. And so we must do the work now to make sure that we have a long-term sustainable industry here in the extremes of basically a mountainous desert that we are in. We have a wonderful region that retains excellent acidity and makes very ageable, delightful wines, but it's farming and it's tough, and grapes, while very hardy in a lot of ways, are also very sensitive to these climate extremes. And from what we can see, that's going to continue. We're going to get hotter in the summer, and we're going to have these Arctic outflows that make very cold events in the winter. So those are the kinds of strategies that we're starting to implement. Part of our Sustainable Wine Grown BC program, where we've taken pieces from the New Zealand system and Oregon Live in particular, two great programs that are far ahead of ours, but we're really starting to try and make that mean something here in BC and convince all the growers that if they can follow these models, they will be not only better for the environment and therefore more sustainable, but also can be more financially sustainable in the future by mitigating some of these climate change risks that we're all facing. In the interest of time, I could keep going and going, but I'd like to hear from all of the other panelists as well, and hear for questions towards the end. Cheers.
Thank you, David. Before I go on to Stephanie, I do want to ask you a question.
Absolutely.
Are you having that situation and knowing that it's likely to come back? Are you thinking maybe you should plant other grapes, such as, I live in Quebec. We have lots of hybrids. We're lucky to be able to use geotextile to protect from the winter, but for the geotextile to work, you need a lot of snow on top, so that kind of forms an igloo. You don't have that much of that snow where you are. So are you looking at planting, hybrids maybe in the future, so that if a year come, not all hybrids, but part of it, so that you can mitigate the risk?
On my farm, not at this stage, because we still have full life in our vinifera. If we had lost all the vines and were pulling out and starting again, that definitely would have been a consideration. I know it is a consideration for a lot of my colleagues. The problem is even in the hybrids, minus 30, the hybrids really the buds start to die as well. So while hybrids might be a solution when we sit around the minus 22 to minus 27 centigrade, once we hit minus 30 or below that, it's not really going to matter whether it's vinifera or hybrid. So I think it is a hedging bet for a lot of people, and we will see a lot more hybrids planted and a lot more hybrid wine on the market. But for me at Tantalus, I love the vinifera wines that we make, so I will continue fighting the good fight for now until we get such an event that even the mitigation strategies we've put in place don't work.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome.
Stephanie, you different in the way that you don't make wine. You make spirit, and you make spirit from apple. And I know that you believe in your heart that if you're going to mix spirit, apple is the best raw ingredient and perhaps the most sustainable. Can you share with us why?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Michelle. And David, well done for having such resilience and continuing to strive with such positivity. It's what we need, the positive action. So congrats for that. So essentially, Avalon is what we call, Tim and I, Tim is my co-founder, an accidental Calvados. So we spent our whole careers in the drinks industry, whether that was corporate side or working in hospitality, and ultimately came to understand that, unlike wine, there is a huge disconnect with spirits from terroir. It is an industry of more commodities and marketing than it is, in fact, an industry of agriculture. Quite simply because of the way that spirits are traded. You tend to buy a neutral grain spirit before you make a gin. You could buy molasses on the market. You won't necessarily be yourself cultivating the cane or even the agave to make tequila. So when you understand that nuance, you can quickly understand why it's actually difficult to action positive climate steps, because the majority of impact is happening in the fields. And while it's important to look at, reducing glass weight, packaging solutions, circularity, and marketing, ultimately everything begins in the soil and in the fields. And so with that in mind, we did this basic analysis across the primary raw materials that you use to make spirits. Grape is one, for example, for cognac and some premium vodkas. But primarily you're looking at grain. Grain will be, your whiskeys, your gins, your vodkas. You're looking at agave for tequila and mezcal, and also sugarcane for rum. And when we started looking at these across water metrics, irrigation, pesticides, CO2 emissions, biodiversity loss, etc., it became very, very apparent to us that rum, being made from cane, and whiskeys, gins, and vodkas being made from neutral grain spirits were the offenders. And when I say offenders, it's quite drastic. The amount of carbon that these monocrops emit, the lack of biodiversity that they do not celebrate, tilling of land, releasing of nitrogen, artificial irrigation, and the list goes on. And so in this matrix, we had plugged in fruit, orchard fruit, and specifically apples. And it was surprising how well these apples were performing. Now, caveat, needs to be grown in a traditional orchard. And a traditional orchard is the ones that we still find in Normandy, France. A traditional orchard is a mosaic habitat. It is one where we find permaculture. It is regenerative. It is one whereby ultimately it's low intervention, right? So thankfully, Calvados is an AOC. So as you wine people know, an appellation d'origine contrôlée, unlike the majority of spirits, which are not very regulated. And so the AOC has, over the years, protected the production, but also the growing. And so we have 200 varieties of apple trees, 120 varieties of pear trees. So we're celebrating already this biodiversity within the actual matière première, the raw material. And it's quite incredible when you start to go deep. And we've obviously commissioned life cycle analysis on the orchards to better understand the sequestration. But there's a lot of brands claiming that for every bottle they plant a tree, and that's how they're offsetting their climate impact. But what happens if you integrate your climate solution, i.e. your tree, into your production and your supply chain? So that was quite interesting. And this term insetting was kind of brought to our awareness, and not one that you hear very often. So we were able very quickly to create a product that was not carbon positive, not even carbon neutral. We were carbon negative. So we like to talk about being planet positive. It's a much more juicier term. It sounds much better than carbon negative. But ultimately, because of this insetting, the impact we were having from a packaging and an energy perspective at the distillery, we were able to inset already because of these trees storing carbon in their roots and in their trunks. So that was the starting point, I suppose, for essentially what we now seem to claim, which is that the science is telling us that traditional orchards are one of, if not the best, raw material you can make alcohol from. So ultimately, cider would be the one ticking all the boxes here. So that was really quite interesting. And ultimately, then it's how do you market this? Because our industry, spirit specifically, is very trend driven. And Calvados is not very trendy. It is not the sexiest of the categories. Brandy died a slow death with the Titanic sinking. So we've had a tremendous mission to try and bring it back, make it relevant, speak with bartenders and ultimately drinkers, because it is our belief that if we were to drink more Calvados and more cider, we would be planting more trees. And through planting those trees, we would be sequestering more carbon. And so it's quite an interesting cycle. And unfortunately, we're not necessarily seeing that happen just yet. There is an interesting movement in North America to reclaim heritage varietals of apples. There's a few studies coming out from Cornell University looking specifically at the performance of orchards in the Hudson Valley. And while we probably need to start to commission more and more research, the initial data coming through is absolutely outstanding. These orchards perform so much better than the majority of the planting schemes currently available for offsetting.
That's great, Stephanie. I love the passion. I have a question for you in regards to pesticide. Is it controlled? Because you're saying that apple takes less pesticide. In my experience, it's been quite the opposite. I guess it depends where you are in the world. We have lots of apples here in my province and elsewhere in Canada, and growers tend to use quite a bit of pesticide on apple trees.
No, that's very true.
So is it unique to you or unique to the industry because it's controlled?
It is indeed unique to the appellation d'origine of the Calvados production. So Normandy is protected. Specifically, Avelaine is made in La Manche, which is a sub-region very close to the Mont Saint-Michel, and it has been pesticide-free since 2016. Now, this is the caveat. Mass-grown apples do tend to be pesticide-heavy, so I really have to underline this traditional orchard is vital, and essentially this ability to have permaculture and this regenerative agriculture around the orchard trees themselves. And these orchards were prevalent all over Northern Europe. I mean, unfortunately, the UK has lost something like 80% of their orchards since the Second World War, so not to mention their meadows. And I suppose with the pesticide comment, it links us back to pollinators. So for us, a lot of even our marketing communication is around being positive. We speak a lot about the fuzzy-winged warriors, the bees, and every single one of our blossoms have been pollinated by a bee, an orchard bee, a wild bee. And the need for the protection of these bees has become a bit of our vital cause. So we do a lot of work with 1% for the Planet, donating to organizations that protect bees, which, as we know, are in decline due to pesticides and urbanization and all series of things. So it is a pollinator-friendly crop, and it's quite outstanding how well the ecosystem regulates itself with these wild bees at play.
Thank you. I'll come back to you when we have a discussion with the group. Edwin, I will move on to you. It's no secret that I admire New Zealand tremendously. I think that what New Zealand has put together to be sustainable, I think you live it. It's not because it's now trendy and we must do it. I think you've been sustainable for so long, and you're so ahead of the curve of so many countries. You've made a commitment to be carbon zero by 2050. The industry is collaborating to get there. You have provided a roadmap how to get to net zero. So can you share with us what New Zealand is doing and how you're collaborating together to get there?
Sure. Climate change is certainly the largest long-term challenge for the New Zealand industry for a range of reasons. One is extreme weather becoming more prevalent, like we've seen in Cyclone Gabrielle, which hit our North Island very hard in 2023. Consumer demand, both at an individual level. Production has to align with individuals' values, as well as arrangements between governments and key retailers who are demanding sustainability certification with a key focus on climate change. Similarly, the costs of production are skyrocketing. And so if you are ensuring your efficiency and minimizing the inputs you need to produce your wine, it's good for your hip pocket and good for the planet. So I think with those elements in mind, as well as obviously protecting the tūranga waiwai of New Zealand wine, or te wā, it is essential that we work together as an industry to really strive to get towards this net zero challenge. Our industry adopted this goal in 2020 and put in Scope 1 and 2 reporting into our Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand program, which turns 30 this year, what that highlighted is that across 98% of the vineyards and for 90% of wine produced in New Zealand, we were then getting through SWINS reports on Scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is a great start, but we knew we needed to do more. So in 2024, we launched the roadmap to net zero, which really highlighted the need for acceleration across all elements of our supply chain. That roadmap calculated our emissions footprint at just over 305,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide for the 2022 vintage. And so that works out to around 600 grams of carbon emissions per bottle. And so to get from there to net zero in 25 years is a big challenge. And it's essential that we work together to do it. There are 5 key areas where we need to focus. In the short term, energy efficiency is key. We know that there is a really significant split between the vineyard and the winery. 83% of the emissions come from the winery and the downstream supply chain, only 17% in the vineyard. And of that, packaging accounts for 69% of those winery emissions, or 57 overall, and transport another or 20% of the total. So energy efficiency across the supply chain is probably the first step that we can all take, and we're certainly working to educate our members as much as possible about the benefits, working with the New Zealand government, and by maximising efficiency right across the supply chain, we're saving cash and also reducing emissions. Secondly, divesting from diesel is essential. It's challenging in the vineyard right now, but working towards that goal is absolutely critical. As a fossil fuel, it remains the key driver, I guess, of vineyard operations. Decarbonising electricity is also really key. New Zealand is very well placed to do that, given the renewable nature of our grid. But really working together across that supply chain around packaging is absolutely crucial. It's the biggest rock we have, and New Zealand has a unique advantage there in that the only glass production facility in New Zealand uses a very high rate of recycled cullet, up to 70%, which reduces emissions as it requires less to heat it. And obviously further education right across our organisation, or across our industry on the use of carbon removals, whether that's actually in the vineyard itself or other companies with land away from productive vineyard area that can be used to plant trees and other vegetative material that process that carbon. So how are we going? Well, there's been significant change since 2022, and that's great to see. We've seen 68% of our wineries are now implementing specific initiatives to reduce their carbon footprint. That's a 10% increase on 2022 data. 63% of our industry use lightweight glass bottles as one of their packaging methods. That's increased 8% since 2022. 15% of our wineries use solar energy sources, a 3% increase from 2022, but still solid progress. 56% of our vineyards are implementing specific initiatives to reduce their emissions. That's increased 15% in 3 years since 2022. And importantly, 30% of our vineyards are upgrading their equipment to reduce energy consumption, to ensure they've got the most efficient machines possible. And that's an 11% increase since 2022. Furthermore, we're seeing an increasing number of our wineries and vineyards become carbon certified, either carbon zero certified or carbon reduced certified through formal carbon accounting programs. That's great to see. Climate change is not a one-step solution. It takes a series of small actions over a long period of time. And I think through Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand, through the education and the incentives and standards that we've established in that program, it really drives that incremental change. We want to take our whole industry with us. And that's why Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand is an inclusive program and has such great membership and really speaks for our whole industry. We have to work together, and it's the collaborative and collective actions of a whole range of our members that are promoting that positive action that will leave our wine and our world better for it. The roadmap is easily accessed on New Zealand Wine Growers website, and it really highlights that while everyone's journey to net zero will look different, collectively we must work together to make this change.
Thank you so much, Edwin. It's so inspiring. And I have a question for you. I think what always amazes me in New Zealand is that you have the larger producers, and sometimes when you look at the bigger producer, they have human resources, they have an entire team just dedicated to calculate the CO2 emission and to put in place sustainable practices. But when you're a smaller producer doing everything and you don't have that department, sometimes I know that some people feel overwhelmed to get on the program and get on that road to that goal. What are you doing in New Zealand so that so many people are part of the program and somehow they're all on that road? And as you said, wow, everyone has a different journey, but what have you done differently that ensures that the small and the big can be part of that journey towards that goal?
Education and engagement is absolutely fundamental for all members of our industry. The benefits of taking action to reduce climate change apply whether you are a big business or a small business. However, when you're a small operator, you've got less time. The industry organisation has to step up and provide that information, which is easily accessible, easily understood, and we have to be there, at the other end of the phone, or to walk down the driveway to visit and to help. And I think Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand has a team that's really focused on that education and engagement. We really focused on getting there in person if we can, or holding our own webinars across our industry, providing excellent education material in terms of and with fact sheets. Videos we're certainly using and partnering with our government, the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, to really highlight what some of our members have done, and then putting those educational resources through our communications channels so that everyone has an opportunity to see what can be done.
Yeah, having the government on your side is definitely helpful, which is not the case, unfortunately, everywhere. Thank you so much, Edwin. We'll come back to you. I'd like to move to Mark Chapman. Mark, before I ask you another question, I know that often when we do panel like this, we talk about carbon neutrality being carbon zero, and some people always say, well, we're always going to produce carbon. So how can we truly be carbon zero? And what does it really mean if we don't purchase credit, because it's not the way to compensate the carbon? Can you explain to us what carbon zero really means, first of all?
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, and great to be here. Yeah, just in terms of net zero, that means radically reducing your emissions by sort of the hospitality sector, sort of 80 to 90%, and then only using sort of removals, carbon credits for the remaining sort of 10, 15%. So it's different to carbon neutrality, and the two terms do get used interchangeably, but carbon neutrality is carry on as you are. You can buy offsets the planet's not big enough to plant enough trees for us all to carry on as we are. So we have to reach net zero to be truly sustainable. I think the other point you're seeing in the chat was sustainability is more than just carbon. So we talk about the emissions we make and the nature we take. So the emissions we make, we have to get to net zero if we want to maintain a habitable planet and habitable temperatures. And we also need to balance the amount of natural capital we take. So Stephanie was talking about, biodiversity. That's absolute. The pollinators. We rely on natural capital for our businesses. So yeah, sustainability is about those two things, both emissions and natural capital.
I know in your business, you're working to find a way to collaborate, for business to collaborate to reduce their carbon emission. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course. Yeah, so Zero Carbon Forum was set up with a small ambition of solving climate crisis through creating a model where industries can come together to design a plan to net zero and then implement it, both collaboratively and within their individual businesses. So like Edwin, great to see what they've done in terms of a roadmap. So Zero Carbon Forum came together. It's a non-profit organisation. We work in the UK supporting both the hospitality, the brewing sector. And for us, hospitality is pubs, restaurants, hotels, breweries. And what we did was we produced a roadmap to net zero for the industry. So again, like as Edwin did in New Zealand, so we've created that for both the hospitality operators, for the brewing sector. And then all of the operators are working together. We've pulled our knowledge and resources through the forum, where we then produce an individual, what we call a climate action plan. It has 189 initiatives across energy, water, waste, packaging, transport, food, drink, and it is updated every year. So all of the operators in the UK share every initiative that they've taken to reduce carbon emissions. And then we have that online, and then that produces these climate action plans that operators then work through within their own business. So we have an industry level roadmap. We have individual company plans that we update continuously to track our progress to net zero. We measure our emissions consistently. To your point, Michelle, helping everybody from independent. So we have everything from carbon calculators. If you're an independent, you can just answer some questions and get an understanding, through to integration with payroll account systems to go down to an ingredient level if you're a larger operator. So, the Burger Kings, the Nando's of this world. So driving company action. We then collaborate on certain areas. So Stephanie was talking about regenerative practices. You can imagine across food and drink, being able to work with our supply chain to do that transition to regenerative farming practices will save millions of tons of carbon across our operators. So we have around 10 million tons of carbon across our forum operators. So we work collectively with our supply chain on areas of collaboration, so things like regenerative practices. We also look at things like low carbon technologies. So again, to Edwin's point about energy efficiency, all of the property directors across all of our operators come together. How do we build the lowest carbon pub, restaurant, hotel? And then we engage with government directly as well, with one voice as an industry, where we can demonstrate we've worked out what we can do, and this is what we're doing. And these are the areas where if you provided us support, funding, particularly access to grid capacity in the UK, we could go faster. So we work through the trade associations and support them to engage government with support, and they're increasingly doing that now. So that's kind of the structure that we've got. It's been very effective in driving reductions. So we've seen operators transition to renewable power and drive energy efficiencies. Again, as Edwin was talking to, that saved over 500,000 tons of carbon emissions every year already across our members. So it's effective, and we're now starting to step and repeat that into other industries. So it's a model that we've now deployed in the cinema sector in the UK. We're working with other industries in the UK now to take that model to help every industry hit net zero. And the final thing I'd just say is I think we engage the CEOs. I know there's a lot of negative narratives from some countries around net zero, but we really we talk about credible climate action. So reduce your emissions, don't just offset them. for tangible business outcomes. So we engage CEOs with the business case for net zero around efficiency, cut carbon and costs. We talk about resilience. So transitioning to things like regenerative practices also build resilience in your supply chain. So, they're regeneratively farmed practices are typically better and more resilient to the impacts of extreme weather, heat, and flooding, particularly in the UK. So we talk about efficiency, we talk about resilience, and we talk about brand. So you'll then be a brand that people want to work for, buy from, and invest in. So again, lots of surveys in the UK in hospitality employ a lot of Gen Z, and about 40% of them will choose who they work for based on their approach to sustainability, and 20% of hospitality workers have already said in the UK they've resigned from who they've worked for because of their practices on climate not being good enough. So we engage CEOs with that, with the really strong, compelling business case as to why they should act, regardless of which way the politicians blow, as we know.
I love the power of the employee. I'm not going to work for you if you're not doing the things I want. I think we need more people like that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a quick question before we go on to the panel discussion. What would you do in a situation? For example, I was talking to producers in Chile last week, and they're having a lot of them are doing what it takes to reduce the CO2 emissions and be more sustainable, but the big roadblock for them is the supply chain. Even though they're fairly large producer who are big buyers, even when they come together, they're having difficulties to convince the supply chain to make a change. And if you're looking at scope 3, then that's where most of the emissions come from in that case. How could your company go about that? Are you able in that situation to be the entremetteur, the person who talks to the supply chain and convince them of the benefits of doing that?
Exactly. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, a big focus for us this year, because as you say, sort of 80 to 90, up to 95% of our emissions sit in our supply chain, depending on what type of hospitality operator you are. So a big part of the work of the forum this year, a big project is we are working together to have a consistent set of interventions that we want our supply chain to take. And we're doing that by commodity area. So and often, our suppliers will say to us, of which many of you are here on the call, be suppliers to our forum members, can you all just get together and ask us one thing? So they'll get 10 different sustainability questionnaires from our members. It's like, just ask us the same sort of thing. So what we're doing is to come together with a consistent set of asks, but most importantly, and this is where we could work with yourselves, is what are the interventions that you can make that will both reduce your emissions but also increase your resilience? So what we've done is we're doing this by commodity. So we're doing it by beef, by chicken, by all of our key areas of emissions, to come together, work out what are the interventions that we want our suppliers to make, and how can we then help them make them, and how can we demonstrate the business case for them doing that. Great to see some of the things everyone was talking about around resilience in the supply chain, and Stephanie was as well. So that is what we are doing as a sector, to come together as what educate our suppliers into the interventions we want them to make, and then hear from them, what do you need from us to help you make those transitions that we think you should do.
That's great. Thank you. You each have so many great things to share. Someone is in New Zealand, the other person is in the UK, and then you all live in different places. And I think our industry, the wine and spirit industry, is quite fragmented. And I think the fragmentation just keeps on increasing as the challenges are coming. I'd like to ask all of you, what can we do to collaborate more? I know everyone has busy life, and it's hard enough to start those steps towards being more sustainable. It takes a lot of energy. What can we do to collaborate more together?
I can have a crack at that, Michelle. I think it's absolutely fundamental. If we're going to retain share of throat for the next 30 years for new and younger consumers, that we need to align our production with their values. And it's pretty clear from the research that we do that younger consumers are really focused on climate change as a key part of their lives. And so the counterfactual is, if we don't do it, they'll choose something else. So we'll become irrelevant. And that's a really scary thought, for collectively the wine and spirits industry. So I think there is a real incentive to work together to drive change, and so that we don't lose that relevance, and in fact we gain relevance, because we're seen as the most sustainable alternative.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go on, Stephanie. Go, Stephanie.
Thank you, Mark. I was just going to add that while I agree with the sentiment, and I really, really do, we obviously need this more educated and structured approach around, for us at least in spirits, like transparency. We have no labeling requirements. You do not need to know what ingredients go into your vodka. And so a place of leadership as well to better understand what, whiskey and cognac is actually made of, because whilst we'd like to think it's made of just maybe grain and water, there is a bunch of additives, there is a bunch of boisé, there is coloring, there is various things that you may not expect. I mean, there's a whole movement in tequila about anti-additives and artificial flavoring that's happening in the US especially. So for us, labeling is critical, and with Avalon, it's a step that we took early on. We led with example and created the first environmental label we believe to have been published on a spirit bottle. And beyond carbon, as we said, something we haven't touched upon at great depth, but it was this thing around water, and water being seen as a precious resource and an important ingredient. So when you need 13 liters of water to make a bottle of bourbon, but just over a liter to make a bottle of Calvados, there should be a kind of somewhat a water rating to say that this is a water friendly or water caring product versus a water intense one.
The question is, how do you collaborate with your peers who make a green spirit? I think sometimes it's easy to convince people who are like-minded, but I do think we need to open it to other industry that perhaps are not aligned, so that we can share why it is so important that you do so. And I could not agree more with Ed, is that if we don't get on board, we will lose the younger generation who are choosing. It's so important to them. They are the ones stuck with this issue. So we need to find a way to reach the consumer and use those practices to make sure that they are on board.
I mean, Michelle, firstly, I think it's fantastic to see the global nature of this event. I'm very moved to see 400 plus people from across the world coming together to look at this. So I think this is fantastic in terms of as your industry coming together around this issue. So I think firstly, come together as an issue. It's great that I think we're here as hospitality, as one of your customers, to say how can we help you, and this is what we'd want from you. So I think that collaboration between industries up and down the supply chain, I do think if we wanted to solve the problem, rather than have COPs of governments, we'd have COPs of industries come together. And I think we'd have probably solved it many decades ago, perhaps, if we'd have taken that approach. So I think collaboration is key on a global level by industry and then up and down the supply chain, because we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all want to maintain a habitable planet we can eat, drink and party on, right? And drink fine wine and lovely, drink our way to net zero, from Stephanie was saying, in terms of being climate positive. So that's fantastic.
Anything to add, David?
Oh, I mean, I agree with everything everyone was saying. I was trying to answer some of the questions in the Q&A, and then my internet dropped out. So I'm back. I feel that we are seeing that change as the boomer generation is drinking less, and we're trying to engage a younger generation. It's very evident to see that they really care about sustainability or any of these other buzzwords that we want to want to talk about. And so Edwin's completely right. We will become irrelevant to them if we don't do this. And it's just smart business practice to do this. Then, as one of the main consumers, as a producer of lots of different goods up and down the supply chain, like Mark was saying, we need to demand from our suppliers of all sorts of different goods and things that we use that they also, the biggest elephant in the room has always been packaging for us, and we're seeing a far bigger buy-in, certainly in our market and from what I can see around the world, into lighter packaging, alternative packaging, and even how New Zealand's always been the gold standard, but how some of them are, for the UK market, for example, are shipping, say, Sauvignon Blanc by the 30,000 litre tanker or larger bags, and then bottling in the UK, so that supply chain is drastically reduced by not shipping that glass right across the planet. Those kinds of initiatives are great, and it's industry that knows that. But how do we get to that message to the consumer? It seems like it's starting already, and we all need to be talking about it all the time to our consumer and making it something that means something within our own companies. But with this new wave of consumer, they're looking for it. They're wanting to know that. And so while it's taking a long time to get to where we are, I think we're seeing that accelerate throughout our industries, and that's an immense positive.
Yeah, I think communication to consumer remains a challenge. I think personally, I think certifications are key, because at least it's a guide. You don't have time if your kids are in the car and you have 2 minutes to pick a bottle of wine. You're not going to weigh the pros and cons and read the back label and do the QR code. You just don't have that time, and that's the reality of a lot of shoppers. I think sustainability certification really help guide the consumer, but there are so many certification, and comes with that, beside the same bottle, the medals of the winning medals, it becomes quite complicated for consumers. So I think I think maybe that's the whole topic, an entire webinar should be done on that, because I think it's something that needs to be definitely tackled and figured out. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes.
Well, I was just going to say, wouldn't it be nice if we could decertify people and kind of go the opposite way, where it's the standard, and if you don't do it, then there's a black mark on you. But we're not there yet. That'll be nice.
It did happen with B Corp. So we've been a B Corp now, renewed for our second 3 years. And in our industry, we had a beer situation with Brewdog based out of the UK. And they did lose their certification because they got scrutinized and fingers were pointed and people did the homework. So I think we can applaud organizations like B Corp that have looked at how they also evolve their standards and have taken on quite a lot of complaints and improved and ultimately made it much harder to retain the certification, so we can continue to be very proud of the B Corp.
And I think, David, just to your point as well, and I think what we're seeing from the research from our operators is customers just expect it, and they just expect us to be doing it. And yes, they're supportive, but it's just an expectation now. So it becomes more of a hygiene factor. You've got a brand risk if you don't do it, rather than necessarily a brand benefit if you do it. Yeah, so, and that's good. That's progress.
Thank you. We have about less than 10 minutes left, so I'm sorry, we won't be able to answer all of your questions, but I will go through some of the questions in the Q&A. And just as a reminder, if you go up, everyone, to the beginning of the chat, you will see 2 links that were shared both by Mark and Edwin. You can see the roadmap and some of the really helpful information provided by Mark. So just go at the very top of the webinar chat and you will find those links. And we just put them again right now. The team of the WSET just put them down. So please look at that. Some of the question is, so Andrew asked, when could the wine industry adopt a shorter, more efficient screw cap in the sake industry uses? I have a lot to say about screw cap. I'll let everyone answer this, and I will have my thoughts on screw cap.
Those screw caps don't really seal wine that well. There's a larger oxygen ingress, so I'd rather go right away from screw caps and into either glass stoppers or natural cork is actually quite sustainable. And certainly products like DM cork, which is what I use, that uses a beeswax as well within its organic cork production, but guarantees no TCA. I think is those kinds of things are more the future for the wine industry than alternative screw caps, which can be quite detrimental to the shelf life of the product.
Edwin, I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Sure. Well, more than 99% of the New Zealand wine industry is under aluminium screw cap. We found that it's an incredibly effective way to seal wine in bottles, and yeah, that it hasn't really been a slow change either. It happened remarkably quickly. Almost 20 years ago. We think that screw cap is the best for quality, certainly for the wine that we produce in New Zealand, it's not even a debate really here. It's just what we do. It's part of our story.
Edwin, have you looked a little bit in terms of the energy production and the advantage of having natural cork because it does sink carbon, and every time you harvest a cork tree, you increase its ability to capture carbon by 5. So if we just look at the purely sustainable aspect, natural cork is definitely a good choice.
Well, it depends where that cork comes from. New Zealand's we don't grow cork here. We have to import a lot of it to reship it. So yeah, for us, in terms of emissions and in terms of our wine, it just doesn't add up. And when you look at the numbers around packaging, the aluminium associated with our corks, with our screw caps, is infinitesimal compared to the actual vessel itself. And I think the broader discussion around packaging, if glass is to remain the key medium for a vessel for wine, we need to look at opportunities to move to low carbon glass, whether that's a very high recycled content or low carbon manufacturing processes. And I think those need to be part of our future to a carbon zero wine industry.
Thank you. Great answer. Adri is asking, regarding packaging, I am working for one of the biggest wine retailer in the UK. It would be great to see more sustainable materials. However, customers still prefer the good old glass bottle. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a paper
Yeah,
on
you go for
display for you. Quick headline is, I actually don't think consumers, or as we like to call them, citizens, are the problem. The problem we are having is actually more the route to market. It's the wholesalers, it's the kevis, the liquor stores. And so it's that middle woman who is actually resisting change because ultimately they need an easy sell. Whereas when we go directly and sample and have the option of both our bag-in-box frugal paper bottle and our recycled glass bottle, consumers are so intrigued. They quickly understand the innovation. And from a quality point of view, if you can nail your branding, there is no issue at all. And we're selling this at a $40 US price point. And they will pick systematically paper over glass.
I think it's outstanding. Alternative packaging is certainly part of the future, and I think the more we can do across wine and spirits to educate and engage consumers that premium quality liquids can come in alternative packaging, the better.
Yeah, and I think consumers are more ready than we think. Especially at a very upper premium, I think people are a bit more conservative. If they buy, their famous Bordeaux or if they buy famous Burgundy. But the reality is those wines still remain a small share of the market. I think for the rest, consumers are way more ready than we think, and they're intrigued, and especially the young consumer, tradition doesn't mean so much to them. Even the brand, they don't need to show which brand they're wearing as the other generation did. So I think they're more open to alternative packaging, which is good. I will take one more question, and then we will have to go. Jessica is asking, how do you see the market demand towards sustainable wine and spirit product? Is it changing globally? Are consumers looking specifically for sustainable product, or do we see global trends being more price-driven? Interesting question in the context of inflation in most parts of the world.
I'd just quickly like to answer this and then maybe pass it on to the wine guys, because I wonder if it's a different narrative for you with the sommeliers. Our primary customer are bartenders, not necessarily end consumers, ultimately, because that's how we set trends in spirits. We build brands in bars. So we're working at a 90% on trade, talking to bartenders who make the decisions to list us, put us in a cocktail, and essentially drive our rate of sale. They, as our audience, are 100% looking for sustainable spirits. So I'm wondering if you guys have that same level of influence with SOMs and decision makers in the on-trade outlets that are helping actually be ambassadors and advocate for you in that space.
I've just been in the market this week, selling some of these wines that we had to get from the US and from Ontario, and talking to a lot of SOMs and retail buyers, and all of them, bar none, a sustainable chat was had, and they're all, certainly in British Columbia, really starting to buy into that idea. If you want a glass pour listing at a decent restaurant now, you have to have some element of sustainability, and I can only see that getting more and more prevalent. At the big sort of conference banquet level, where it's very price driven, then not so much. But even those buyers are trying to find those sustainable alternatives to their price driven needs as well. So it's very, very encouraging.
Yeah, I can chip in. I think sustainability is becoming key for market access, and if you don't get market access, you can't get in front of consumers. And market access applies both at government levels, but also at the level of the retailer, where many are purchasing their New Zealand wine from. And so the conversation around price is obviously fundamental, but if you don't have that that broader context of sustainability and meet government and retailer requirements, the price is irrelevant because you're not there. So it's becoming a passport to trade rather than a value add in the market.
And I just want to add to this, there was a study done in different markets, including the UK, Sweden, US, and Canada. And they asked across all age, would you be willing to pay more for a product if you knew it was sustainable? While the millennials were the one and the Gen Z willing to pay more than let's say the boomers, everyone across all age were willing to pay up to $3 more per product if they knew the product was sustainable. So they're looking for sustainable product. And the other thing too is they did a survey and asked people, they put different type of certification, organic, biodynamic, and other names they knew, like natural wine. And they asked people, knowing all of those terms, which one are you most likely to choose? Even though people were more understanding of what organic was, they actually preferred sustainable, even though they didn't really know exactly what it meant. They felt the sustainable certification was more holistic, a better approach because it encompasses everything. So consumers are definitely looking for a sustainable product. They want it. The difficulty sometimes is how to identify those products. We have, I think we have completed our webinar. I think we just went a little bit over an hour. So thank you everyone for staying on board. I know we went over, but there were so many interesting questions. Thank you so much everyone for listening and for being so engaging.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing and putting that together. And thank you everyone for watching. You should now have a feedback poll that has appeared on your screen. So please do answer that. And yeah, thank you, echoing those thanks to Stephanie, David, Edwin and Mark for sharing your insights. Just to let you know, the recording of this session will be emailed to everyone who signed up today, as well as being available to watch on the WSET Events Hub on our YouTube channel, where you can also catch up on all of our previous events. Links will also now be posted in the chat, directing you to details for the follow-up sessions from today's webinar. So we have Sustainable Land Use and Soil Health on the 13th of May, and Rethinking the Supply Chain and Innovations for a Greener Future coming up on the 1st of July. And we already have some great panelists lined up for these sessions, including Laura Catena, who is WSET's Honorary President and Managing Director of the Bodega Catena Zapata, and also Antonio Graca, who's Head of Research and Development at SOGRAP. So to find out more and sign up for any of our qualifications, please do visit our Where to Study page at wsetglobal.com. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, everyone.
Merci, thank you.